How much should you charge for commissions? Now, I've had this trouble, and I'm sure a couple of you guys do as well. So I thought this would be the perfect time for me to share my knowledge and how I've come up with a system that I feel worked for me, and how maybe you guys can take that and translate it in your own ways. As I'm talking in the background of this video for the visuals, I'm actually doing a commission, so how fitting. I was commissioned by @Mr. Drawmatic on Instagram, and these are his characters: Lock at the bottom and Sprite at the top. This was a lot of fun to do, actually. I think a key thing about this is for you to figure out how much you are worth from top to bottom and to do it in a very honest way. And then keep in mind that the more value you have to offer, that in turn increases whatever you want in return. The general rule is to charge in time intervals. So depending on what you're doing, you might want to charge per day. But in most cases, especially when it comes to art, I think, internally we charge per hour, like most jobs. And then you come up with a price that makes sense to you per hour based on your value. And you determine what your value is. But I just urge you to do it with honesty. Now, we will get to the math, but when you're done with the math, a healthy place to be is around, $50 per hour. You don't want to really be lower than $25 per hour unless that's where you honestly feel you lie. And then above $50 per hour, $100 per hour, all that can depend on the other things that you feel are valuable that you bring to the table. And then, we will go from there. Now, the question is, what is the value? Like, where does that value come from? The value can come from many places. For example, experience and knowledge. So for instance, someone like me who spent a lot of time doing online research on how to do certain things, I have a certain expertise in doing a certain thing, which brings certain people to me specifically. There are not that many people doing, Copic marker stuff with that shonen aesthetic. So sometimes I get a couple commissions to do stuff like that specifically. So there is value in the knowledge I have and the knowledge that I've learned in the amount of time I've spent honing my craft. The fact that, I graduated college and have a master's in what I do, that's, you find the reasoning to add the value. And so for someone like me, there are a lot of places I can pull from that show that there is value in what I offer. How long I've been doing it also kind of shows potentially, not always, but potentially how good I am at that certain thing, and maybe even puts customers or patrons at ease, knowing that he's been doing this for a while. So there is value in that. There is value in knowing that what you will offer will turn out a certain way and will turn out good. You can point to certain other places that might give you good reviews. Let's, for instance, the comments you guys leave on my videos, or maybe images that I post up on DeviantArt or Instagram or wherever, are to some degree, not that much, but to some degree show value in my work, that it's visually appealing. The more credibility the brand or individual or anything or company giving me a good review, the more credible I am in a certain way. It's weird, but there's value in that. You have to ask yourself, is there value in who you are? Is there value in the fact that not only are you going to do this and do it well, but the fact that you did it, is there value in that? Whether it be maybe you are some super duper dude in the professional industry of whatever, because again, some of these ideas can be applied to not just art, but anything else. So is there value in the fact that you did this particular thing? You need to decide if there is or there isn't. Are you like hella popular? So if you did this commission and you shared it, and maybe that's what you do to all your commissions, and you sharing it adds value to the work itself and even puts a spotlight on the creators or the commissioners of this piece and things like that. You need to figure out all the points of value in what you're offering. You also need to recoup the value that's being taken out of you. So the amount of time you would use to do this work, to do the work, to make this piece of art, like we said, so an hour, right? What that hour, the hour, could you have used that hour to do something else that would have gotten you money, right? Or, how much do you value your time? Do you think your time is valuable, right? So that's another thing, and that you need to take into account. You're giving away value in the tools you're using. What's the level of those tools? Are the higher the level, the higher the value in most cases, not all cases, because generally speaking. It's less about the tool and more about the user, but sometimes the tools also play a significant role. So for instance, if I'm using a certain tool to create your work, I'm also basically putting some wear and tear on that tool, so it's you're paying for the usage of it as well. A simple example would be if I'm doing a traditional commission for you and I'm using paper, that paper has value, so that value is something you take into account as well. So you need to like look at everything you're going to use to create that artwork or whatever, and add that value and take into consideration what you're going to lose versus what you're getting. Is there value in you being professional? Is there value in the way you present yourself and present your work and present their work once it's done? Is there value in the way you submit? Do you have a deadline that makes it very convenient for them to maneuver through their own schedule and time management and all that kind of stuff? Is there value to that? Because there is value, especially maybe when you compare yourself to other artists that might not have that, that might not offer that convenience. So there's value in that as well. You being organized, you being able to organize yourself. Maybe you have like some people do this where they have a sheet, an info sheet, a commission info sheet that has all the details about their commissions, also leaving room to further questions, maybe leaving like an email or something like that to where potential customers can contact you if they have specific questions. And you use that sheet to also be organized in letting people know what you offer and how much it is, and just being organized in that sense. Is there value to that? And in some cases there is, in some cases there isn't. And you also need to be clear in what you're offering, but it's up to you whether you want to leave room for customers to suggest certain things or explain to you exactly what they want. And then the fact that you're taking that into consideration and coming out of what you're actually offering, there's value in that as well. You need to figure out what's valuable to you, and the more things, the more expensive you are. And how the increments come in, that's also up to you. Maybe per value you add a dollar goes in every time, but there is a way to do the math, and there are several ways to do it. It's 100% up to you, but by the end I'll give an example of what I mean. But just know that the more value, potentially the more expensive, or at least that makes sense. And then there are other obvious things like, the more workload, obviously the more expensive. That's like that comes with. So an example would be, you might price headshots at a certain amount. Let's just say $20, and if you're gonna draw a head and a torso, you imagine it'll be more expensive because there's more value to that illustration now. There's more art going on, there's more detail going on. If it wants a full body illustration, then now have its own price. And then maybe you have a system, an organized system, where maybe if they want a sheet of that character where you want to draw multiple versions of that character from different poses, maybe a front view, a side view, just both full body illustrations, and you charge accordingly. So maybe if a full body illustration is $100 and maybe 200, but then you can do things where if it's the same commission, the more the more characters that are being added on to this sheet, you can then reduce the price and like give a discount each time one is being added on. All that stuff is up to you to figure out. How do you want to charge posters with multiple characters on it, like an illustration that has multiple characters on it? So if you have a system of how you draw characters from like the head to a torso, or just the head, or the full body, you can then take into account how the illustration is going to look, and let's say how many heads, a character can be in an illustration, but it's a group illustration, but maybe we only get to see the head of that character. You can charge accordingly, or you can charge if the character is in it at all. There's like a flat rate. You need to like figure all that out, and usually this happens after you've figured out exactly what the customer wants. And then you can give them an estimate, especially when it's very specific, when they want something very specific and it's outside of what you offer initially, at least what you offer by default. If people want something very specific, then you can give them an estimate after you guys have discussed on what you want, maybe what style they want it in, and you being able to do it in that style is going to cost extra because it's more effort for you and it's like beyond the style that you're offering. I'm not saying you should charge for everything you think is valuable, That's the part that is up to you to decide what is worth charging and what isn't. And you're using this to come up with a fixed price. You're not using it to come up with a price where you charge people per hour. You're using it to come up with that initial price that's a fixed price. All this stuff is just good to know in case you're put in a position where you have to back up why you've priced your work at whatever it's priced at. And it helps you come up with that initial number, that fixed number. So I'm not saying go out there and charge people per hour, but this is just to help you come up with that initial price. And, you know, in most cases, you're actually not going to need to back yourself up. It's just kind of like a just in case thing, because most commissioners don't ask or don't care much about what you think is valuable. All they care about is that fixed number and if they can pay it or not. When you use these averages to come up with your value and come up with your fixed price, that's it. So if someone asks you to draw a full body drawing colored, and for you that's usually $70. If that person then comes back to you to do another full body drawing, and maybe that drawing is a whole lot more complex, maybe the character just has a lot going on and it takes you a whole lot more time, it should still be $70. At least that's the standard, and that's what I recommend. So even if it took you longer, I wouldn't charge more for that. You just have your fixed price, even though it took you longer to come up with the second commission. Another indicator of value is supply and demand. So if there is a lot of demand for what you're offering and you can't keep up, that's a clear indicator that there is a lot of value in what you're offering. So it's a good way to counter that is to increase, like it shows that you have the value, so you can increase your price. That way you can keep up. So that's another indicator of value. And if the demand is like really low, then maybe that's an indicator that you value yourself higher than you actually are. Not always, but maybe. And so maybe reducing your price is something to think about. Again, like I said at the beginning of this video, you kind of have to be honest with yourself. And so in some cases, you're not valued at what you think you are, maybe because for whatever reason, and maybe that could be, maybe your art is just not where you expect it to be, or where customers would expect it to be at for the price you're asking for. So it's a good counter to reduce the price in that scenario. So you kind of have to find a balance and be honest with yourself and figure out where you provide value. Is there something you do that's unique to you that nobody else does, that people like, and you can prove that people like? Then there's value in that. And that could be your art style, that could be a certain tool you use that only you have because you created it. So there's value in that. So looking at other people's commission info sheets is a good way to kind of gauge how yours should look. Maybe you look at their art and you think that they offer more than you, they offer more value than you, then maybe you want to price yourself a little lower. But you have to be very careful with that translation, because sometimes people might price really low because they're trying to raise a lot of money quickly. And so you have to take that into account and read the room, so translate very carefully. And in some cases, you know, you might think that you don't offer as much value as the person you're comparing yourself to, but you know, you might. So maybe get a second opinion on that. That's another way to go about it. Or maybe that person is so amazing, but then, you know, they're doing it for fun. They're not really doing it for the money. You need to take that into account. But at the same time, looking at other character info sheets is a good way you can learn how to organize your sheet, and some indicator on how to price your sheet as well, if you have a good understanding of what that creator is valued at least from your perspective, but it might differ with theirs. So just keep that in mind. Just because Jimmy charges $200 for a headshot doesn't mean you should, and just because Jimmy charges $5 for a headshot doesn't mean you should. Jimmy might be cuckoo bananas for all you know. And if your name is Jimmy watching this, my bad, y'all. My bad. So know your worth and be careful of people that try to lowball you. If you think you're valued at a certain thing, you know, stick to it and stand your ground, and you know what you want at it. So there are several examples of, you know, people who want you to do work for free, and they'll say, oh, you know, you're gonna get a lot of exposure, dude. Like, you're gonna get a lot of exposure. And in some cases, there are ways to gauge that. So again, it all comes down to value. If Kylie Jenner today wants me to do an illustration for her at, you know, for free, in fact, but she says she's going to send a lot of traffic my way, guaranteed, via via one of her social media outlets, then that's a no-brainer, because even big corporations would pay thousands of the hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, for that same quote-unquote shout-out. And shout-outs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars is definitely worth more than what I'll charge her for, I don't know, freaking headshot. So in that case, sure, I'll give you 20 headshots for free. But, if Jimmy, who doesn't have anything, is telling me I'm going to get exposure, so let's do this comic. I have the idea, but you draw the whole thing, and it's going to be so popular, you get so much exposure from it, dude, it's worth it. And Jimmy is crazy, amongst other things. In fact, little Jimmy might even be rude especially if he knows that I'm busy and, throwing that kind of free offer at me. And I get those emails a lot. Like, a lot. But no biggie. I'm not mad at little Jimmy, or at least all the little Jimmys that offer things like that and want to work with me. It's just, it's all in fun. In most cases, I don't think they've thought it out through. So it's just up to me to say yes or no. And in cases like that, it's a big no, especially because I'm busy with a bunch of other stuff. Not even especially. I have my own ideas to do. Why would I do your comic for nothing? For nothing guaranteed, except for this mythical exposure. But people are different. There are people out there that do it for fun. But for as much fun as I find doing art is, not me. Before I get to a really decent example of things, there are little tips here and there that I, just picked up that I feel like would be useful to people like you. And some of them are like pretty straightforward and you might already know them. So for instance, getting paid, you can come up with a system where maybe they pay half up front and then they pay the rest when you're done. And maybe you can, during the duration of the creation of the work, you can give them updates via thumbnails and emails and things like that, so they know that the work is being done, and so that they can critique things during the process and not after you're done, because then it takes a lot more work to redo things. So it's best practice to kind of be giving them updates, show them a sketch, show them and like break it down that way, so that they can make any adjustments if they need to along the way. There's some cases where people pay you completely up front, and there's some cases that people pay you completely at the end, right before you send, or if you trust them enough, after you send. It's completely up to you to come up with that system, but I just urge you to truly think about it. Maybe you want them to pay you in thirds. There is no rule to how you get paid. It's up to you. You're your own boss. And you can also do nice things here and there to keep good relationships with your customers. By giving them maybe a deal here and there, taking some percentages off, and that's usually nice. Both parties agreeing on a contract is a sure, safer way of dealing, and just making sure that everyone's on the same page and everyone understands what the terms of the agreement are. So some contracts might say that, the creator, the commission, the patron is the one in charge of the work. They own the work completely. And in some cases, to even give up ownership, because there's value in that can be a completely different price to give up ownership. Because sometimes when you draw it, it's in some, depending on the waters, it's actually still your work, not even theirs, even though they've paid for it. It's a little shaky, it's not that straightforward, but you can make things clear with the contract in that you're giving away ownership of the work, and that person can then use that artwork to do whatever they want with it. In some cases, the contract can also state that even though they own it completely, you can use it for non-commercial purposes, like maybe, putting it in your portfolio. Or maybe it says that you both own it. I don't know. But contracts, they're different. You guys decide what the terms are. And that's just a safer way of doing things. I don't do it all the time, but in some cases it's necessary, especially if there's a lot of money at stake. A great book I recommend that would help you guys in pricing as well, even beyond just, doing little artwork here and there. But again, almost everything, but specifically for graphic artists, is called Graphic Artists Guild Handbook of Pricing and Ethical Guidelines. My teacher gave it to me once, and it opened my eyes. It also briefly talks a little bit about all the contract stuff and what's legal and what's not legal and blah 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 blah. Bottom line, that's another one: value and ownership. And doing that with contracts is just a safe way to maneuver through the waters. Oh, and by the way, there are people who charge extra once if they know what the work's going to be used for, and if it's going to be used for a popular person, they might want to take advantage of that. I don't know if I advise. It's blurry. It's blurry. So here's a quick example of the math, right? So for someone like me who's gone to school, MFA, BFA, I've done extensive research in what I do, experience and knowledge, there's value in that. I have a decent following online, there's value in that. So, you never know, the person can get exposure and press just because I did it. And, the more popular I am, the more likely that's going to happen. So let's not even use me as an example. If again, sticking with like a Kylie Jenner, if Kylie Jenner did a comic and the comic looked like trash, right? It'll still get a lot of press, just because she did it. So that's what I mean. So there's value in that. Not Kylie Jenner value, but there is some value in that. Not that much, but a little bit. There's value in the way I do things, the aesthetic I do, professional look I give, that's backed up by fans and credible companies and creators who may have quotes about my work, just backing up how credible I am and also the way I do things. Even the fact that other companies or people have paid me to do certain things adds value to me already. Gives me a little bit more credibility than just some regular person who hasn't had any experience like that before. So there's value in that. Me using the proper tools, my professional presentation experience, the way I make things easy for the commissioner, or good communication. I'm very responsive. There's value in that. Ownership, like I talked about before, there's value in that. The fact that I'm unique and rare, there are not that many people like me making comics or offering what I'm offering. So it goes back to supply and demand. There's value in that. My creative value, so sometimes someone might offer something, and they want me to basically come up with it. They give me like a couple descriptions, but a lot of the creative visuals are coming from me versus them. So there's value in that. Sometimes you might be commissioned to do a drawing, right? And you're asked to draw Wolverine. Well, Wolverine already exists, right? So to a degree, I'm copying. I'm not really, unless you give me liberties. But like if I'm copying, oh, you want the Wolverine that you saw in a certain comic, it's already laid out. So I'm just copying what I'm seeing. But if you want me to come up with a Wolverine, there's value in that. If you want me to come up with a character that doesn't exist at all, there's even more value in that. So again, moving forward, based off of all of that, I could decide that for me per hour, I'm looking at $50 to $75. And then if someone wants me to do a comic page for them or a manga page for them, I take into account the amount of pages. So for instance, when you get pages, it's like 40 pages in one, and it's usually anywhere from like $10 to $16 to get the book. And or in fact, it's definitely over 10 because you have to order the book and there's like shipping and blah 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 blah. You kind of have to charge for that. So per page you're looking at maybe 4 cents. The tools I use, maybe you charge $20 for the fact that I'm using my tools that finish. These are expensive. I have to buy more eventually. Usually it takes me about an hour on average to sketch a page, an hour on average to ink a page, an hour on average to tone and edit a page, and then about 3 hours on average to color a page. So depending on what the commissioner wants, I'll kind of massage this whole thing to give them an estimate per page, and it would probably be anywhere from $150 to $300. Sometimes it might be depend on their style as well. The style they want might be easy for me to do, so it'll be less for me to charge because it'll probably take me less time. Because even though I say 1 hour for this, sometimes it might take me 30 minutes, but you kind of have to think of everything at an hour at least. Basically, give yourself an hour for everything, even though it's going to take you 30 minutes. I don't know. It depends. In some cases, I do break that rule, and so there are illustrations that would take me less than an hour, so I wouldn't charge an hourly rate for that. And that's why you might see things in a commission list that would be less than $50. You know what I mean? So it's up to you to figure that out. But for a comic page, I'll probably charge anywhere from $150 to $300 and above. You want to be honest with yourself, and you have to come up with good reasoning so that you're able to explain why you charge what you charge. And then you can even come up with things like maybe after a certain amount of pages, say after 10 pages, you then give the commissioner a discount for every page after that. You basically come up with your own system and just make sure you're clear very early on. You want to be able to understand your value. Think of it like FMA, right? So whatever you're even being compensated with, it might not even be money. Whatever it is you're being compensated with, you need to understand the value, and you want equivalent exchange. So I'm on my FMA-ish. Anyways, also need to understand whether it's a commission or a collaboration. So in some cases, you might not be paid up front. You might be paid in a percentage of the sales of whatever it is going out. But that's up to you to decide if that's worth it, if it's of equivalent exchange. Again, I recommend you look at other commission sheets, commission info sheets, talk to other artists, and you would also form a better understanding of all that I'm talking about. But I hope that you fully, or at least to a great extent, understood where I was coming from throughout this video. If any of you guys are interested in commissions from me, here's a sweet deal for y'all. You guys can get 10% off discount if you follow me on Twitter and then you like and retweet the post that has my commission info. I really appreciate it if you guys leave your thoughts in the comments when it comes to pricing your work, and maybe even some of your experiences or stories, good or bad, in the comments, and then so that other people can learn from. You can also put your commission info prices in the comments and tell people what you charge. So that's kind of the question of the day. What would you charge for commissions, and what would you offer? Please don't forget to Detroit smash the like button of this video. That helps a great deal. And if you watch this video to the end, that also helps humongously. You have no idea. For those who've checked out my comic books, checked out Saturday AM and any of my projects, Apple Black Volume 1, Volume 2, read the first 4 chapters free. All the links you could possibly need to be in the description below. And big shout out to everyone who's checked that out. Don't forget to subscribe, because that also helps a lot. Hit that bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. You can get 2 months of Skillshare free. Just use the link in the description below. You're welcome. And that's it, guys. White Manga, and I'm out.